Today I'm going to be talking about modeling the data in CluedIn, and how is this mindset you should be having when you're thinking about modeling your own master data. So it is the model, so it is kind of a metadata view of how you're going to be connecting the data, and this is the picture you might be having in your back of your mind on how you want to actually model your master data. So you're going to be having, for example, a person, and this is my personal preference, is that to have more intuitive namings, more intuitive entity types. So this is what I would call entity types, which you might have around the person. Because for me, person is employee, person is a contact, person is a external employee, I don't know, anything that you're having business with or have information about, it's a person, it's a human. So this way I want to connect all of these people to a same entity type. As a second part, I also have a company. My personal preference is always a company over the legal entity, because simply just legal entity is always a little bit too abstract. So that's why I'm keeping it as simple. And at the end of the day, you can call address, you can call it location the way you want it. This is an additional information you want to have about address. And of course, you connect the pieces together as you can see here. Person can report to a person. That other person then we're going to be called a manager. Or person has a business contact with a person because they are doing business together and they are constantly in communication because of the business that they are doing together. And so on and so forth. And when you look at this is exactly the point where person can also have different roles. So, and this is achieved, including using something called vocabularies. So you can have multiple vocabularies for different persons, depending on what exactly you are, what they are doing in your company. For example, you can have an individual, employee, and contact. There doesn't need to be that all of three informations are available for your person, but rather that you are going to be having some of the information for each one of these vocabularies. For example, all of them might be having individual information, something like a common, like a name, birth date, phone number, something that is always the same. And you can use this as to kind of find the people which are having this kind of based on this private information. And some of these people are your employees. So you might be wanting to have additional information about each job title and salary and stuff like this. At the end of the day, you might have also, for example, a contact that you are doing business with, which is, for example, certain type of a persona that you have in your sales process defined. For example, I don't know, this is a C-level guy, this is head of engineering, and of course, to which region it goes to. So this is kind of three different vocabularies that you can have about the person, depends on the role that he's having in your system. So how does this be mapped in CluedIn? So let's say that we are having, for example, our employee data in two different data sources. And this is Alex Smith or Alexander Smith. Let's say that this is actually the same person. And let's say that we take away this part of if this is this, how is this merging being done and so on. Let's go simplify the whole process of just how do we map this data into CluedIn. If you look at on this point, the data stewards will gonna be able to just go on a CluedIn and map this data themselves, and you get to have this kind of mapping at the end of the day. So this means that now all of these little pieces that you're having are gonna be coming into one single record. I'm gonna skip the part of how is this being merged exactly. It just, let's say that we have now this point. We have these values in conflicting information about the customers, and we use something called survivorship rules. So to define which of these values should prevail at the end of the day to form a golden record. And for example, based on these golden records which have defined in advance, so that you can define graphically in CluedIn, you end up having this kind of a resulting golden records. So this means now, from these two different data sources and information about Alex Smith from two different data sources, you have this final record done where you have two different vocabularies. Now, what you might have, and we're going back to the original place, how is this all in kind of real life being connected together? This model in real life would look something like this. So let's say that we have middle person, Rick Jones here, which reports to Steve Mills. I mean, they are both working for ABC International Company, while Rick is also having constant contact, business contact with Malika Jones, which is working for their customer, DF International. And you get to see that because Steve and Rick are at the end of the day working for the same company, so that means that they are working in the same fancy district in London address. And this is how you could kind of build this graph based on these things. And you notice here, we have Steve, Rick, and Malika both being a person. However, if you look there, dive a bit deeper into each one of those, you're going to see that, for example, Steve and Rick have only vocabularies which are relevant to the individual. Of course, everyone has it, and employee. And the second, Malika, unfortunately, is not employee of ABC International Company, for which is doing this master data management to begin with, but rather is in their system more like a contact person from which is do they keep track of within their, for example, CRM system in their overall business. And she is having a additional specific contact information that you want to keep track of. Now, you might ask yourself questions, seeing all of these relationships, sometimes you have a little bit more complex relationships, which have a little bit more properties in it. To kind of picture it out, let's go back to our original data model. And if we look at, for example, this lives-in relationship, we can make it more complex. We can say, hey, I want, and I have information that the person who lives in a specific address, and it does not need to be, for example, the employee, can be also, for example, we are a banking company and we are needing to, for our credit information, we need to store this information of what kind of accommodation it is that he's living in. So it is not enough just to have a direct information about what the address is, but for example, if he's doing the rental, or if it is the owner, who is then the landlord, since when is he's living on this address, size of the flat, rent per month, and stuff like this. So how is this being modeled in CluedIn? So there would be multiple ways you can do this, and it's really depending on you how you're gonna want to do this in the best way. Let's say that I want to keep this lives-in relationship just to have like a direct connection to the person and address. But as a best practice, what CluedIn always suggests is to create a middle node in between person and address, which we're going to define this live-in accommodation details, which you might want to have. For example, there is in this, and reason why we want to have this is because you want to have this complex modeling within that as well. For example, specific information about accommodation, like it has the size of the flat is, for example, one of the very common thing that is egal if it is a rental or ownership, it's always the same. Or for example, if it is the rental, then you want to know information about landlord or something like this, or in case of ownership, how much it currently owns of this flat that he's owning, because usually it's through credit and stuff like this, and you own just a percentage until you pay off the flat, for example. This is kind of additional information based, like separated from different vocabularies. You can kind of build up based on this. So now, the question is, everybody is often asking us is, how me, working 25 years now in the relational world, and I remember how I can model the data using the relational databases, usually you end up coming to a graph and not really understanding what would be the best approach to do this. So let's say that we have, and this is a very common case, when you are having, for example, a case of a person, an address, and there is additional information you want to kind of understand, like let's say many-to-many relationships that you might have between person and address. So in this case, let's make it more complex. Let's add one more address. So the person has one too many. So a person has two addresses, one residential, one business. So what including during the modeling mapping time, it will happen is you're going to be having, for example, three informations. So this table that you had, relationships table between the person and address, you will gonna actually map it into a person. And just for the sake of keeping or storing this information about the relationships. So we generated two new persons. One is having a works-in address, another has a lives-in address. And we, of course, because we mapped also the addresses, we have two different nodes or different in a graph, which is having the address information. So one in a Bransome Road, another Spring Street. So now, because in CluedIn, for example, we have defined this person ID to be this kind of identifier within CluedIn, CluedIn will automatically merge these records together into one single record, as you see here. So now when it's merged record, you're not just merging the information about all of these three records together, but rather also the relationships that they are also having or bringing with. And this is how you might have from one person multiple addresses. And also, if there is multiple persons who live on the same address, it will gonna be also connected to the same address because you are connecting using the same IDs. So this is the way you are kind of building your graph, and this is the way how you're gonna be kind of merging these records together. I hope that this brought a little bit more clarity on how the mindset works with the modeling graph data, and thank you very much for your time.